Hello, my name is Carrie Brown and I'm with the Central Mississippi Regional Library System. Today I'm going to be reading to you chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Magic Treehouse, Lions at Lunchtime, written by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 5, Ha Ha. "Oh, no, shouted Annie. She raced down the bank until she reached a sandy, clear spot. Here, she called. The wildebeest followed her with their wild eyes. Jack watched in disbelief as the swimmers changed their course. Slowly, all the wildebeest swam to where Annie stood. She waved them in like a traffic policeman. Jack grabbed his backpack. "Annie," he cried, "let's go before we get trampled." "Keep it up," she shouted to the wildebeest as she took off after Jack. They ran farther up the river, away from the incoming wildebeest. Finally, they stopped to catch their breath. They looked back. Everything seemed fine. The wildebeest were scrambling safely over the riverbank. Soon they would graze on the grass prepared by the zebras. "Good work," Jack said to Annie. "Thanks," she said. "Okay, now for our riddle." "No, first we've got to get clean," said Jack. "You look like you're in a mud suit." High-pitched laughter rang through the air. It sounded mocking and mean. Jack and Annie turned around. They saw two spotted brown animals standing in the tall grass. The creatures had bodies like dogs, but with sloping backs. They laughed again. "Ha ha," said Annie. "You don't look so great yourself." "What are they?" said Jack. He took out the book. He tried not to get mud on it as he looked for a picture. When he found it, he read aloud. "On the African plains, the hyena is the ruling predator after the lion. It makes a sound similar to a high-pitched human laugh." "What's predator mean?" said Annie. "It means it catches things and eats them," said Jack. "Oh," said Annie. "Yuck." The two hyenas laughed again, and they moved closer to Jack and Annie. Quietly, Jack read more. "The hyena has a reputation for being a thief and a coward." "Let's see if they're cowards," whispered Annie. "Let's try to scare them." The hyenas laughed and moved a little closer. "How?" Jack asked. "Act like a monster," said Annie. "Now!" Jack and Annie made terrible monster faces. They put out their hands and rushed at the hyenas. "Arr!" they shouted. The hyenas yelped and scurried off. "Scaredy cats!" Annie shouted after them. "Come on," said Jack. Annie and Jack took off in the other direction. They ran around a bend in the river. Jack heard the hyena laughter again. It sounded far away. "Good," he said. "They're gone." "Hey, maybe we can wash over there," said Annie. She pointed to the edge of the forest. There was a small pond surrounded by tall grass. Zebras were drinking the water. "Yeah," said Jack, "if it's safe enough for them to drink." The zebras ignored them as they walked toward the pond. When they reached the edge of the water, Jack set his heavy pack down in the dry grass. He glanced around. No lions were in sight. But then he heard something. On the far side of the pond, something very big was coming out of the trees. Chapter 6, Spick and Span. "Be still," said Jack. Jack and Annie stood frozen as an elephant stepped out of the shadows. It waded into the pond and dipped its trunk in the water. "Oh, wow," said Annie. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. An elephant wasn't going to chase them and eat them. Still, the elephant was huge. "Let's sneak away," said Jack. "But I want to watch," said Annie. "Fine," said Jack. He was tired of Annie getting sidetracked. "I'm going to solve the riddle by myself. I'll meet you back at the treehouse." He turned to go. A spray of water rained down on him. It came from behind. He shouted with surprise and looked back. The elephant's trunk was pointed straight at Annie. "Cool!" she cried. "He's giving me a shower!" The elephant sprayed her again, then again. The mud slowly rolled off her face, her braids, her t-shirt, her shorts, her legs, and her sneakers. "I guess the elephant doesn't like dirty kids," said Annie, laughing. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Finally, she was clean and soaking wet. "Now it's your turn," she said to Jack. Jack stepped forward and shut his eyes. A blast of water hit him. It did feel like a shower, a strong shower. When Jack was clean, the elephant let out a grunt. Then he started to splash himself with water. "Thanks," said Annie. "Yeah, thanks," said Jack. I'm spick and span now, said Annie. When the sun dries me off, I'll be like new. Good, said Jack. Now we can get serious. He picked up his heavy pack. We have to figure out the answer to the riddle so we can leave this place before we run into real trouble. He looked around nervously. Where are the lions? He wondered. A small bird flitted near his head. Hi, Annie said to the bird. Jack turned back to her. According to the riddle, we're looking for something gold and sweet. What do you want? Annie asked the bird. The bird twittered and flew around Jack and Annie. Its feathers were dull gray, but it had a bright, happy manner. Annie, listen to me, not the bird, said Jack. The bird kept fluttering all around them. She's trying to tell us something, said Annie. Jack let out a long sigh. You are driving me crazy today, he said. But I feel like she needs our help, said Annie. Maybe her babies fell out of the nest. Annie, you can't save every animal in Africa, said Jack. This bird is important, said Annie. Trust me. The bird darted toward the trees. It landed on a branch and cocked its head at them. She says follow, said Annie. The bird headed into the forest. Annie started after it. Don't go in there, said Jack. You might run into... There was no need to finish. The bird and Annie had disappeared into the trees. A snake or a lion, Jack said to himself. Come on, Annie called. Jack moaned. He pulled on his pack and ran. The peanut butter jar thumped against his back. Chapter 7. Hi there. The forest was cooler than the sunny plains. It was filled with shadows and bird calls. Where are you? Jack shouted. Here, said Annie. He found her in a thick glade. Bright rays streamed between the trees. Green leaves and vines swayed in the dappled light. The little gray bird sat in a tree twittering at them. Yuck! What's that? Said Annie. She pointed at a round brown thing hanging from a low branch. Bees buzzed around it. If that's her nest, it's a pretty weird nest, said Annie. That's not a nest, said Jack. It's a beehive. Don't you see the bees? Yikes, said Annie. She stepped back from the tree. But the little bird darted at the beehive and pecked at it. What's she doing? Said Annie. The bird kept pecking at the hive. I don't know. Maybe she's as nuts as you, said Jack. Look her up in the book, said Annie. See if she's nuts. Are you kidding? Said Jack. That nutty bird isn't going to be in this book. Just look. Jack opened his Africa book. He kept turning the pages. Just as he thought, there was no gray bird in the book. Forget it, he said. Keep looking, said Annie. Jack turned one more page, and there it was, a little gray bird, a beehive, and a tall painted warrior with a spear. I don't believe this, said Jack. Then he read aloud. This bird is called a honey guide. It's both a friend and a helper to the Maasai people, an African tribe known for their fierce fighting skills and bravery. Hi, honey guide, Annie called to the bird. I knew you were important. Jack kept reading. The honey guide leads the Maasai tribesperson to a beehive. The bird waits for him or her to scatter the bees and take the honey. Then the bird feasts on the honeycomb. That's cool, said Jack. They work together, like the zebras and the wildebeests and gazelles. Yeah, said Annie, and she wants us to be her helpers. We have to scatter the bees and leave her the honeycomb. How do we do that? Said Jack. He looked back at the book. It didn't say how. Well, maybe we could wave those weeds at them, said Annie. She pointed to some bright green plants that looked like giant fans. Jack put his book and backpack down. He and Annie pulled up the weeds. They waved them near the tree, and the bees scattered. Next, Jack grabbed the tree branch and jiggled it. The hives fell to the ground and broke open. Annie stooped and stuck her finger into the golden honeycomb. Yummy, she said when she tasted the honey. Try it. Jack stuck his finger in the honeycomb, too. He licked off the golden honey. It was the sweetest honey he had ever tasted. Now the honey guide can get to her honeycomb, said Annie. Yeah, but she'd better hurry before the bees come back, said Jack. It's weird, said Annie. Honey's so sweet and good, but to get it, you have to go past a lot of dangerous bees. Oh, man, whispered Jack. That's it. That's what? Asked Annie. Jack said Morgan's riddle. I'm the color of gold and as sweet as can be, but beware of the danger that's all around me. What am I?" "I get it," Annie whispered. "Honey." "Honey," said Jack, nodding and smiling. "That's it. We've answered Morgan's riddle. Let's go home." He stood up to leave. He gasped. Standing in the shadows was a tall man with a spear and a curved sword hanging from his belt. His face was painted in fierce, bright colors. Jack knew at once what he was. A Maasai warrior. "Hi there," Annie said in a small voice. Thank you. Be sure to tune in next week for chapters 8, 9, and 10. Goodbye.